Is living in Mexico for you? Welcome back to the channel, My Latin Life. Today we're diving into a question I get asked all the time. Is living in Mexico right for me? Is it right for you, the audience at home? Whether you're dreaming of tacos on the beach, a lower cost of living, or just a big life shakeup, Mexico's got a lot to offer. But it's not all sunshine and margaritas. There's some real stuff to think about too. So grab a coffee or a cerveza if it's that time of the day, and let's break it all down. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button as well, and let's get into it. So first things first, why Mexico? What's the big appeal? Let's start with the obvious. Why are so many people packing up and moving to Mexico? First off, the cost of living is a huge draw. Depending on where you go, you can live a pretty comfortable life for a fraction of what you'd spend in the US, Canada, or Europe. Think rent for a nice one bedroom in a cool city like Merida or Puerto Vallarta for $500 to $800 per month. Groceries, you're looking at fresh produce, meat, and staples for way less, maybe, $200 a month if you're cooking at home. Compare that to, say, California or Toronto, and it's no wonder people are saying adios to high rental prices. Then there's the weather. If you're tired of shoveling snow or dealing with gray skies half the year, Mexico's got you covered. Coastal spots like Playa del Carmen or inland gems like San Miguel de Allende offer warm, sunny vibes most of the year. Sure, it can get hot, sometimes too hot, but you can always find a spot that matches your climate vibe. Mexico has so many different climates that there's always something for you, whether you want the desert, whether you want the jungle, beaches, mountains. Mexico has it all. And let's not sleep on the culture. Mexico has this incredible mix of history, art, and traditions. You've got ancient Mayan ruins, colorful festivals like Dia de los Muertos, and food that'll make you question why you ever settled for fast food back home. Plus, the people are generally super welcoming. If you make an effort to connect, you'll find locals who will treat you like family. Oh, and one more thing, proximity. If you're from the US or Canada, Mexico is right there. Flights are short and cheap, and there's multiple flights every single day. So popping back home for a holiday or family visit isn't a huge ordeal. You'll ideally get a direct flight as well. It's like the perfect mix of new life and not too far from home. I know people that travel almost weekly or monthly from the US to Mexico for business obligations and so forth. So moving on to the next topic, where to live in Mexico. Some top spots. Now, Mexico is a big country, so where you settle matters. Let's run through some popular spots and what they're like. First up, Mexico City. This place is massive. Over 20 million people in the metro area, and it's got everything. World-class museums, insane street food, and a vibe that's somehow chaotic and chill at the same time. Rent is higher here than other parts of Mexico, maybe around $1,000 a month for a decent apartment, but you get that urban life with a twist. If you're into more of like a beach life, you have a lot of options, but probably the most popular ones are Puerto Vallarta on the Pacific side and Playa del Carmen on the Atlantic side. Puerto Vallarta has dramatic sunsets, and it appeals more to sort of West Coast expats. I find in general, people from the West Coast of Canada and the US, they prefer the Pacific side of Mexico, whereas people from the East Coast, like Boston, New York, Toronto, Montreal, they prefer the eastern side of Mexico, like the Yucatan Peninsula. Playa del Carmen is on the Caribbean side. It's got turquoise water. It's touristy, but has a super fun energy. Anywhere you go in Mexico will have a very solid expat community, so you won't feel totally lost. English levels are generally very high, especially along the coast and in touristy areas. Rent is very affordable pretty much everywhere in Mexico for a Canadian or American, where anywhere you go, you're going to be spending a fraction of what you spent back home. And to be steps away from the ocean, that's the kind of experience that would basically be unaffordable for 90% of Americans. But you come down to Mexico and pretty much anyone can afford to live steps from the ocean. For something quieter, a lot of people are leaning towards San Miguel de Allende, Guanajuato City as well. These are gorgeous colonial towns in the highlands. They got cobblestone streets, artsy vibes, and a huge expat crowd. It's safer than some other spots. The weather is very mild year-round. Another mild spot is Lake Chapala near Guadalajara. Guadalajara too is reasonably mild in terms of weather. And rent can be very cheap. We're talking less than $1,000 a month for a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment, or maybe a whole house in a private community, depending on how fancy you go. But it's very easy to find rentals under $1,000 a month. Then there's places like Mérida and the Yucatan, which is one of the safest cities in Mexico. Where else are people going? The hippie people are going to San Cristobal de las Casas in Chiapas for a super low cost of living, or you can rent a whole house for like $300 a month. A lot of people are going to Oaxaca City, where you have really good food and good weather, consistent weather year round, some of the best food in the entire world, and a very low cost of living. So there's kind of like the classic expat and retirement spots that I think a lot of people have heard about or considered at this point, like San Miguel or Puerto Vallarta or Los Cabos. And then there's sort of like another tier below that of up-and-coming expat spots that might appeal to digital nomads or to retirees. Just depends kind of where you're at in life. Each spot has its own flavor. So just think about what you want. Do you want a city buzz? Do you want beach chill? Do you want small town charm? Do you want big city hustle and bustle? And Mexico has something for everybody. Moving on to the next section, let's talk about some practical stuff, the nuts and bolts of visas. Moving to Mexico, you really can spend a lot of time on a tourist visa, where typically you'll get 180 days visa free. And Mexico can also be quite chill about border runs, at least right now, where if you leave and come back, usually that'll reset the clock. So most people start with a tourist visa, but if you're staying longer, you'll want to get a temporary resident visa. It's pretty straightforward. You show that you have some income or some savings, and with that, we can get you residency in Mexico. You'll usually start on temporary residency, unless you're a retiree, then sometimes you go straight to permanent. But if you start on temp, you will renew to permanent after 4 years of residency, and it's a great thing to have. I mean, permanent residency in Mexico is truly permanent, and both on temp and permanent, there's really no physical presence requirements in order to maintain the residency. The only time you'll ever have to be in Mexico as a temporary resident is for the renewals, and you're probably only going to have 2 renewals. One at the 1-year mark and then one at the 4-year mark when you renew to permanent residency. If that's a little bit confusing, I have many dedicated videos talking about the residency process. MyLatinLife is a full-scale immigration consultancy. We help people get residency and citizenship in Mexico. There's a link in the description to this video where you can book a call directly with me, become our client, and we can get residency or citizenship in your hands very fast. Some people who are really on top of it, they get residency in less than 30 days. Maybe more typical is around 2 months, but it's very fast in Mexico compared to other countries. For example, in Costa Rica, it can take like 6 months to get approved for a residence visa, whereas in Mexico, you're going to have that residency card in your hand usually in less than 2 months. So it's a very, very fast process compared to other countries in Latin America, which is another thing that Mexico has going for it. Healthcare is another big thing in Mexico as well. So Mexico has a mix of public and private options. Private care is where it's at for expats. Think $30 doctor visits, $50 specialist appointments. The quality is solid, especially in big cities, and a lot of doctors speak English. You can get private health insurance for $1,000 to $2,000 per year, which covers most stuff. Compared to US prices, it's a no-brainer. The cost of living is low, but it varies. In a cheaper spot like Oaxaca, you could live very well on $1,500 a month. In a pricier place like Los Cabos, you might need $2,500 a month, maybe $3,000 a month. Obviously depends on how big of a family you have in tow with you, but you're going to be spending somewhere between 50% less than you spend in the US to maybe even like 1/4 of what you used to spend. Right? Lots of people live on less than $1,000 a month in Mexico. Lots of locals live on less than even $500 a month in Mexico. So it just depends on it depends on a couple things, but probably your biggest variable is rent. There are some people spending $1,500 a month on rent. There are some people spending $300 a month on rent. So it really just depends. Internet is very good. That might be $25 a month for very high speed internet. Utilities are very cheap. Property taxes are very cheap to non-existent. Food is very cheap. So really your biggest variable is going to be rent. And if you have a car or not. Most people opt to not have a car. It's just not necessary in Mexico and can be a little bit of a headache. One thing to note, you'll need some Spanish, especially if you go for the Tier B and Tier C cities that I personally prefer. You can get by without Spanish in expat-heavy areas or touristic areas, but knowing the basics really opens the door and makes life smoother. Apps like Duolingo or classes can get you there fast. We recommend Baselang as well as Language Blend for online lessons, and there will probably be a link in the description for our code to get some free lessons. Moving on, let's mention a couple of challenges real quick. Mexico's not perfect, obviously. Safety is one thing that people ask about. Look, most places that expats go to, like San Miguel, Mérida, Puerto Vallarta, are as safe as anywhere else if you're smart. They're actually safer than most places in the US. But, the normal things, don't flash cash, avoid sketchy areas at night. But some regions, of course, do have crime, so check travel advisories. Generally, most crime happens near the border or in really touristy areas like Tulum and Playa del Carmen. But if you're living in a normal Mexican city, like Oaxaca City or Mérida, just like a normal functioning city, you're not really going to be exposed to too much. And I would argue it's much safer than Boston or New York City, most Mexican cities. Okay. Bureaucracy is another hurdle. Getting permits or dealing with paperwork can feel like a scavenger hunt. It can be slow. It can be confusing. It's something that you just don't want to do by yourself. So whether you want to open a bank account, get a driver's license, get your residency visa, MyLatinLife, we can help with all these things. We have a great team of lawyers in Mexico. They speak perfect English, and they're going to be able to hold your hand and help you with anything that you could possibly need as part of relocation to Mexico. So again, book a call. There's a link in the description, and we're going to make this process of relocating to Mexico so much smoother for you and get that residency visa for you, either as a plan A for immediate relocation, or you can also get residency in Mexico as a plan B while you keep living your life in the US or Canada, and it's kind of a call option that you have on the future. So is living in Mexico for you? Well, it depends. I mean, if you love adventure, warm weather, and stretching your dollar further, it's a dream. If you're open to learning a little Spanish and rolling with the punches, you will thrive. It's perfect for retirees, digital nomads, or anyone craving a slower, richer life. Your social life is going to skyrocket. Mexico just has something for everyone at every age group. Retirees love it, families love it, younger digital nomads love it. There's really just something for everyone in Mexico. So that's it, folks. What do you think? Could you see yourself living in Mexico? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let me know if you want a deep dive on any of the spots or topics that we discussed in this video. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends who's Mexico curious, and hit that subscribe button for more. Till next time, see you in the next video. Adios.